Please take your seats. I'm calling to order Champaign County Board Finance Committee of the Whole, Tuesday, October 1 at 6:01 p.m. Please, roll call.
Alex. Here. Berkson.
Here.
Carter. Coert. Esri.
Here.
Harper.
Here.
Hartke.
Here.
James.
Here.
Jay.
Here.
Kibler.
Here.
Langenheim.
Here.
Maxwell.
Here.
McGuire.
Here.
Michaels.
Here.
Mitchell. Petrie.
Here.
Quisenberry.
Here.
Richards.
Here.
Rosales. Schrader. Schwartz.
Here.
Kurtz.
Here. We have a quorum. I'd like a motion for approval of the agenda, please. So moved. Mr. James, second. Mr. Esri. Any changes to the agenda? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Public participation. We will fall back on our regular rules of the night. 5 minutes per participant and 1 hour for total public participation. First up will be Mr. James Kilgore. Please, Mr. James Kilgore has just walked in the door.
Good evening. James Kilgore, 511 South Draper, Champaign. Last Thursday night, I attended a forum of the League of Women Voters where both Sheriff Dan Walsh and the chairperson of the Finance Committee, Chris Alex, said that there wouldn't be any recommendation for even $1 of spending on jail construction for 2014. So that made me feel pretty happy after the year and a half of campaigning around that issue. And I took a big sigh of relief for the moment. And then I began to reflect a little bit more on what comes next. So it's great that we're not going to see the sort of mega jail that was in the cards early on in the stages of this. The cost of that has been a subject of much debate, so I won't repeat the dirty figure that people seem to hate so much. But there's three things that I think that we need to pay attention to down the road. And the first one is obvious. That's what you're looking at tonight. And that is funding. That not building a jail doesn't mean changing the criminal justice system. It's the funding for the programs that have been recommended by the Community Justice Task Force and the ILPP report that will be the ultimate test as to whether or not we're going to see change. So in particular, it's urgent that we see that funding shifted out of the public safety sales tax, out of construction from there and into programs. And I would like to emphasize once again the need to fund someone to direct the reentry program. In the recommendations around the budget, there wasn't funding for that, but I think without that person in place, that program won't happen. If we leave programs to be driven by fundraisers who aren't personally interested in the area, they will die. And we can't let a reentry program die in this county. It's too important in terms of restructuring. The second thing is that the programs that get funding need to be evaluated. They need to be followed up. We need to find out what's happening, what changes are actually taking place. One of the things that the sheriff said is that he didn't want to recommend any building for 6 months or for several months, but he might reassess after 6 months or so and come back with a recommendation. We've been doing mass incarceration a certain way for 30 years. Things are not going to change in 3 months. They're not going to change in 6 months. This needs a much bigger time frame in order for changes to take place. But at the same time, there needs to be concrete methods of evaluating the small steps in progress that are happening along the way. So let's make sure that funding doesn't just go to programs and that there's no mechanism by which the people responsible for managing that funding are reporting back to the county board and saying precisely what kind of changes are taking place. In a reentry program, is recidivism going down? Are people entering more programs? Are people finding more jobs? Are people finding more housing? Are people being reunited with their families? And the third thing that I think we can all take from this process is the critical role of public participation and community involvement. That without public participation and community involvement, we wouldn't have gotten to the big picture, to looking at the criminal justice system the way in which the county board and the people throughout the county have looked at it over the course of the last 18 months. And I think the board deserves a lot of praise for the steps that they've taken in order to go through this process, but I hope that this community participation, this public participation, will become part of the routine way of doing things in Champaign County. So as a reminder of the importance of community participation, I have brought for you tonight to be submitted to the public record the 84 pages of petitions that we've had signed by people in various places throughout the county and beyond over the last 18 months. At the farmers market, going door to door in communities, through online petitions and so forth. We have 84 pages of names, addresses of people predominantly in the county, but also people from beyond that have expressed their support, not only for not building a jail, but for funding alternatives to incarceration. So I hope this will be part of the public record and that this will help to remind the county board of the importance of public participation.
Thank you, James. Okay, I'll take it and we'll put it in the record. Thank you very much. Is it Belden Fields or Folds? I'm sorry. Fields? Thank you, sir.
My handwriting is not good. It used to be good, but then I started working on computers, and that was the end of it. I want to make a statement on behalf of an organization which I'm representing tonight, and then I want to make a couple of reflections myself. The statement that I'm going to read now is from the Central Illinois Jobs with Justice. It's a organization of labor unions and both religious and secular community organizations. And the statement is as follows. We oppose any attempt by the county board to spend millions of dollars on new jail cells when thousands of people in our country are unemployed, homeless, and impoverished. The county should take strong steps to spend taxpayers' money on programs that benefit the working poor and the unemployed in our county. Building new jail cells does nothing to assist these people and does not contribute to public safety. We urge you to use public safety sales tax money to fund preventative programs, not jail construction or intensified policing. That's the end of that statement. The two remarks that I want to make refer to the report that was submitted by the group that the consultants that you contracted with. I didn't read the whole thing, but I read it the way people read when they do research for writing a book or something. I went and I saw what was of interest to me. There were two things that struck my eye that I found problematic. But I must say, in general, I thought the report was really excellent. But there were a couple of things that I think need to be critically considered. One of them is the recommendation to use the downtown jail to house prisoners for the federal government. And I'm approaching this as somebody who has been concerned about mass incarceration in the United States for quite a long time. And it's been one of the foci of my work on human rights that I started doing in the 1980s and have continued to do through that. I don't think that we want to make that kind of usage of it. I think what we want to do is reduce incarceration, not just bring in new people to fill cells that were filled previously by prisoners here from this county. The second thing that concerned me was, I don't remember the name that he gave to a group of decision makers. I think there were about 5 in there. The sheriff would be included, the state's attorney. I think Deb was in there, Deb Busey, and there were a couple of other people, I believe. And he wanted those meetings to be closed meetings. And that does concern me because I think transparency is very important. The other aspect of that is that this would be, as I understand it from having read it, it would be not by design, but de facto a group of all white people who would be making decisions on this committee. And I think that that's going to be a real problem. So I would encourage openness. I think that is the norm here, and I would hope that it prevails in that regard as well. Thank you very much. I just want to say I think you all did a lot of really good, hard work on this, and I congratulate everybody on the council, the county board for doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's nice to get compliments. Ms. Barbara Wysocki.
I'm Barbara Wysocki, and I'm here on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Champaign County. I've come to endorse the recommendations found in Dr. Kalamoff's report to the county board and to the citizens of Champaign County regarding incarceration in the criminal justice system. I can only speak on behalf of the League of Women Voters if the endorsement is consistent with the position of both the local and the state league organizations. In this case, both are already on record supporting the implementation of intermediate sanctions in the community. Both favor prompt trials, support an adequate and professional staff to work with those incarcerated, and encourage expanded prevention and treatment programs to ease the burden on the criminal justice system. The League also promotes a bail system that does not rely on financial ability alone as a criterion for pretrial release, and a more streamlined assessment of a suspect prior to arrest and booking. The League backs proposals that promote programs and services for self-improvement, so that the focus from the beginning of one's confinement is being better prepared when they are released. It goes without saying, then, that we are gratified to see that so many of these recommendations on the agenda for consideration this evening for incorporation into the 2014 budget. The devil, of course, is in the details, and there are certainly a number of details that still need to be addressed. There is no doubt that implementing these recommendations is going to be an ambitious undertaking, one that will require the cooperation of every department in the county judicial system and law enforcement areas and their key personnel. Besides the report itself, the League also endorses the process that brings you all to this point. While the findings and recommendations are themselves noteworthy, the League holds up for appreciation the work of a number of individuals both in and out of county government. Over a year of study, research, and dialogue has ensued, providing a model of civic discourse around a concern where there are strong opinions and feelings and a long history of practices and encoded and statutory procedures. Much of the methodology employed is consistent with the procedures League uses in reaching consensus and in deciding the subsequent action. I have not addressed the matter of our jail facilities, and that is actually purposeful. While we deplore the conditions in the downtown jail, we are willing to trust for the moment that the successful implementation of other recommendations will sufficiently decrease the jail population, rendering that site unnecessary for continued incarceration. We also recognize that further study will probably be needed to either repurpose or redesign that facility or to move in an entirely new direction for the site itself. Thank you.
Marlon Mitchell?
Good evening. My name is Marlon Mitchell. I'm the Director of Prison Ministry for Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church here in Champaign, which is located at 808 East Bradley. First of all, I'd like to begin by just thanking everybody for this long process for the last 18 months to 2 years in which we wanted to look at the criminal justice system as a whole. I would like to thank also Dr. Kalmanoff and also his constituency and his staff for putting together a proposal as a platform that we can all work off of. And I also like to thank the Champaign County citizens for being patient and giving all the input that they have, because this is an inclusive report that all of us that can benefit from. Now, before I begin, I like to think of this criminal justice, I guess, system assessment as when I first started this endeavor of paying more attention to what was happening in our community as far as with the county jail. I came across a quote that says, "Build it, and he or she will come." That's a quote that comes out of a movie called Field of Dreams back some 20 to 30 years ago. And so as I thought about that quote, I thought about, are we talking about programs or are we talking about penal institutions? So I thank Dr. Kalmanoff for coming up with such a great inclusive report, and once again, something that we can build off of. But in particular, I would like to talk about the reentry proposal. He also set forth a budgetary recommendation of a person to direct this program. Now, there's plenty of programs from coast to coast here in the United States that we can build a model off of, or we can kind of use as a cookie cutter to build a program here in Champaign County. And I also like to talk about those opportunities for those felons or the returning citizens that we have coming home. Annually, there's between 400 and 450 returning citizens or parolees here in Champaign County. And IDOC, as I speak, we have about 1,200 citizens that are from Champaign County that are in IDOC custody. 98% of those individuals will be returning back to Champaign County. Just last week, there was a Summit of Hope, what we like to call Summit of Hope, at Parkland College, in which came to Champaign. Now, what that is an IDOC initiative that invites parolees and also invites different vendors from social service networks, health providers, and things of that nature to help parolees and those that are coming home for parole to try to get and gain their footing. Here in Champaign County last week, we invited over 200 parolees to come out. I personally sat down with between 75 and 80 of them and just discussed, their position and where they were and what they've been through. And each and every one of them had a common thread, and one of the common threads was employment, opportunities for employment, and then also just reconnect with their families. So the need is great. The need is very great. So I'm here just as a proponent, just to say that, we do have a situation here in Champaign County in which we can be innovators by establishing a reentry program. I think that our county has done an extensive report on all the things and all the different initiatives that we can set forth. And I just want to say that the reentry program is one of those things that I know personally from speaking to the constituents that it will affect, and us as a whole with community, public safety and everything that's involved with carceral procedures, that this is something that we do need in our county. So once again, I want to say thanks for everybody for all their time, energy, and effort over the past 18 months to 2 years, and I do believe that we're heading in the right direction. Thank you.
Ms. Diane Zell?
Good evening. I'm here once again representing the National Alliance on Mental Illness for Champaign County. And in that capacity, I represent hundreds, if not thousands of people, some of whom I don't even know. We have several, 4 points that we'd like to make regarding the upcoming budget decisions. First of all, I'd like to echo the statement made by a number of speakers in the past about increasing the allocation of public safety tax money that goes to social services, that this is up to maybe 30%. This is something that is reasonable considering that that would still leave more money available for your current uses. Public monies that are allotted to social services are quite cost-effective, and I'd like to stress a couple of reasons for that. One is that the pay scale for those employed in social services is notoriously low. I'm not saying this is good, but it's notoriously low. And secondly, Judge Ford one time said on Penny for Your Thoughts that he started our now defunct mental health court with a rubber band and a paper clip. So perhaps he could do the same by starting an assisted outpatient treatment program, which is a program that is used for chronic offenders who have mental illness issues, and it intervenes before these citizens are jailed. So it would cut off, they're actually going to the jail. Also, third point would be Sheriff Walsh has been quoted as saying that more than half of those who are incarcerated in our county jail have mental illness and or substance abuse issues. So therefore, if these preventive programs were put in place, you could possibly see a huge reduction by half or more in jail beds used, and therefore the costs associated with those jail beds would also be reduced significantly because you would not be paying for the physical and mental health treatment of the inmates while they're in the jail, nor would you have to provide their medicines, which can be expensive while they're in the jail. And our fourth point would be that those who receive appropriate mental health treatment can be contributing members of society instead of those who are sucking up the resources. So we are saving money, we are turning people into contributing members. Today in the mental health field, recovery is the expectation when people receive the proper kinds of treatment. I'd like to also commend the county board and all those who've worked so hard in enabling public participation and in seeing this whole project through with an open mind and listening to those of us who've been working very hard in our many times volunteer capacities in trying to make a better life for the citizens of Champaign County. Thank you.
Ms. Jessica Watson?
Hi, my name is Jessica Watson, and I was born in Urbana, and I currently live in Champaign at 618 West Church Street. And I've come here because I would like you to put the money that was being considered for the new jail, into preventative services for especially people with mental illness. I'm a member of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I became a member because I suffer from schizoaffective disorder, and I've been on disability, low income, for 10 years, I guess now, since 2003, in the community. And the reason I am able to get up and contribute to the community is because I receive medicines and counseling and all kinds of services from community elements and other social services. I would not be able to get my medications and my counseling and things that keep me up being in recovery the way I am right now. And I do a lot of things thanks to those services, which I could be taking up a jail space. I could be carted off to a prison, a local one, because when I don't get my medicines and services from preventative services that I get locally, and I hope we'll have more so other people can get them and have a happy life like me. And the reason is if I didn't get my medicines, I have been known before I was diagnosed and got treatment to just kind of wander around the park. And there are other people who still do wander around the park, and they can be a nuisance. And I wasn't exactly a nuisance. I'm kind of a friendly nuisance when I'm ill because I get delusions like I will think that everybody in a red color and everybody in a blue color, shirts, coats, whatever, I'll think they're my friend. And everybody in a brown coat or sunglasses is not my friend. So I just avoid the ones that aren't my friend, but I'll be going up to all the people in red and blue that are strangers, and I'll just be talking to them and just kind of not being bad, but, you know, people just want to enjoy their own time in the park and not have, you know, people like me with mental illness if I'm not getting my treatment. So because I'm getting my treatment from local services and preventative services, I'm not in the jail. I haven't been in the jail. In fact, I am having a big show November 1st of my photography. The Champaign Park District has, a jury has chosen my pictures to be in a show November 1st for 6 weeks in the Springer Cultural Arts Center in downtown Champaign. And that'll go for 6 weeks and be in there all during public hours, just me and one other artist, Jamie Katava, who has watercolors. And so we both, all the people going to ballet classes and art classes and aerobics classes and anybody who wants to come see it can just come and enjoy the art that myself and other people are contributing. And I just think that's so much healthier for both me and the community that I can do so many things. And I don't just sit around. I get out there, and this morning I was asked by an aerobics teacher to take pictures in Zumba class, which will, just volunteer. And so I took all her pictures in Zumba class that might go into it's for the Park District catalog. So I try to make myself useful, and I have fun doing it, and I'm just enjoying my life. And I want people to enjoy their life and not take up the public funds going into jail and suffering. People like me that suffer from schizoaffective disorder and other mental illnesses, we can get help. And, I'm just pretty cheerful. It's better than being kind of cheerful in the park for the wrong reasons. So thank you.
Ms. Damita Parsley?
Hello, my name is Damita Parsley. I am an ex-offender. I'm in the process of re-entering society, and it is very hard. I was released from prison 15 months ago. I've been out here every day for the past 15 months, putting in application after application after application. It gets frustrating, but I have to do it because I can't afford to go back to where I came from. And I think had some type of alternative had been available to my sentence, I don't think I would have been going through what I'm going through now. I really believe that I would be a productive citizen in society. It's very hard trying to reenter society. You know, I feel like I'm still serving a sentence. I feel like I'm still serving a sentence. I've tried programs where they say they will help you with computer programming classes, basic computer skill classes. They will help you with this and that, and they will help you with employment. But none of it is true. They might help you with some basic computer skill stuff, and that's okay, that's fine too. But they have on their employment, and all they give you is like a few job leads, a few tips on interviewing, few tips here and there. But before I was released from prison, I had taken all types of classes to help me because I knew I didn't want to go back. So I prepared myself to re-enter before I left prison. And one thing that I really use today that I am so glad I took the class, coping skills. Yeah, the coping skills. And I really have to use them every day, all day. I get frustrated. I get so disappointed. I would get a phone call for an interview. I would go to the interview. Then they would call me back maybe a week later for orientation. So I'm excited because I'm about to be employed. When I get there, I go through the orientation. After the orientation, I'll sit there and wait to get my schedule. I go in the office to get my schedule. He tells me, oh, we haven't done a background check on you. So it's very hard and frustrating re-entering society. And I truly believe if a re-entry program is put into place and funded, it would be a great help, and it would reduce recidivism by a lot. By a lot. You know, I want to work. I want to work. Yeah, I made some mistakes. I made some bad choices, but I take responsibility for that. You know, I want to work. And I wish so bad that there was a program set into place for parolees when they come home. They could re-enter in society, maybe take a few classes or whatever, and then be given employment. Because that's the main thing when you are a parolee. The main thing is employment. First is housing. And by the grace of God, I'm at the shelter for women. And I'm so glad that was there. So I really think a reentry program would be the key to parolee success. Thank you.
Aaron Ammons.
Good evening, everyone. Aaron Ammons, 1108 North Busey. I'm here tonight to address some of the budgetary issues surrounding a couple of different topics, not just the jail issue. I'm here as a representative of CU Citizens for Peace and Justice. I'm one of the co-founders, as well as the president of Citizens with Conviction. I guess priorities, when you see where people spend money, you find out where their priorities are. So tonight is probably the crux and the apex of all of the meetings that we've had for the past 18 months. So we'll see exactly how this all turns out. A couple of different things that, as a group and personally, we certainly do support the the public defender having an investigator, one of the things that we think is extremely important, and we've asked for this for several years, is to try to level that playing field to make sure the individuals who do have cases, especially serious cases, have an opportunity, and their attorneys have an opportunity to really give a thorough defense. So we certainly are supportive of that. We see that the issues of classification and pretrial have, there's a recommendation to support those, and we think those are great ideas as well. I had an opportunity to talk to Roger Holland before we started this evening, and I'm excited to see that that the court administrator and the presiding judge are on board with moving forward with some of the pretrial services. One of the things that, of course, is missing is the reentry program that Ms. Demita just spoke about, and it's unfortunate. I'm trying to use politically correct terms. I'm not real happy about that. That it's not a part of the proposal. I understand it's a discussion tonight. The reason why, one of the main reasons why I feel like that's a concern is that while we're supportive of the other instruments to be put in place, these other instruments are primarily designed to make the system run smoother. But they're not necessarily designed to address any of the concerns of the people going in and out of those systems. So maybe there's some disagreement with that, I'm not sure. But from what I can see, the classification, the pretrial services, public defenders are all addressing the issues after a situation or a crime has allegedly been committed. And while we support those things, I don't think anything should be taken away from them. Actually, I do think that there has to be some effort towards reentry and addressing the issues of individuals, what Ms. Demita spoke about earlier, whether in relationship to soft and coping skills, just how to deal in a working environment when you haven't been in one in quite some time, locating employers who will actually hire people to work with the governor's new program to give the tax benefits and the tax breaks to different organizations. There was an entity in town that used to do that. Of course, we no longer have the Urban League. So there needs to be a concerted effort and an opportunity for someone to be able to address those concerns, to build that database back up or to build that list of employers back up. I know Ms. Demita spoke about the computer skills, and certainly in an industry that's no longer putting out mass manufacturing of auto parts and things like that, then everyone needs to have a certain level of computer skills and computer literacy if you want to be, if you don't want to be a drag on the economy. So we definitely would need a reentry program that would have those type of that aspect to it. Now, I know that that's going to mean a program that we've seen in other different cities and around the country, somewhere around $200,000 or $300,000 maybe to run effectively, and $200,000 being on the low end. But when you think about all of the different areas where you need individuals to run those programs or run those aspects of the reentry program, then it's not too much to ask, especially when you consider the recidivism, how it's going to drop, and the impact that it's going to have on the community. Now, I don't have time to go into a thorough proposal. I think that it would be nice to be able to present that and at some point be able to work with some of you who are better with numbers than I am to come up with that. But at this point, we would certainly be supportive and urging for a position to be put in place for the coordinator or whoever's going to be the oversight of the reentry program so that we could begin to build that system. Yes. You said 1 minute, or you got a question?
All right. Time's up.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron.
Good evening. My name is Mikhail Lubansky. I've lived in Urbana for 9 years and have worked in the university for the same 9 years, teaching in the psychology department about racial justice and restorative justice. And I'm kind of late to this discussion. I know it's been going on for a good part of 2 years. And while I've popped in and out, I have young kids at home, and I've sort of committed to my family to not be out. But I wanted to come and talk to all of you today, and I'm grateful to all of you for taking the time that you have to engage in this conversation. If I say things that are already familiar, I apologize. I just want to put this, our current jail situation in the context of sort of mass incarceration in the United States. I'm guessing that a lot of you know that incarceration in the U.S. has increased between 350 and 400% since 1980 when the war on drugs began. I'm guessing that you probably also know that the United States incarcerates more people per capita than any other country in the world. We have roughly 5% of the world's population. We're now incarcerating almost 25% of the world's prison, over about 25% of the world's prison population is in the U.S. And you probably have heard arguments, and I think those arguments need to be heard, that our system as it currently exists has a lot of racial bias within it. I think a lot of that bias is unintentional. I think it has a lot to do with implicit bias that psychologists have documented over decades now. But nevertheless, it exists, and the impact of that bias is that today about 1 in 100 black women are incarcerated, and the picture for black men is much worse, so that a black person born today has almost a 1 in 3 chance of being incarcerated in his lifetime. Apart from the bias, there is a lot of data to suggest that our current incarceration system isn't effective in meeting the needs of the community, the needs that I think all of us share regarding community safety and the well-being of everybody in the community, including those that cause harm to others, in the sense of wanting them to take responsibility for what they did, but then be able to re-enter the community in the way that several other people have addressed before me, and become contributing, productive, full members of our society. I work in the education system where, as we all know, the criteria for passing is about 60%. If we look at the recidivism data using the same sort of criteria, the recidivism data is between 65 and 70% of those who are incarcerated will be incarcerated again. That's a success rate of roughly 30 to 35%. It's not passing. There are alternatives. A number of people before me have talked about other alternatives, but restorative justice is an international movement, and the United States is behind the curve. Many countries have adopted restorative responses to crime and other types of conflict with a lot of success in terms of both recidivism, promising recidivism data, and cost effectiveness, because restorative responses are much more cost effective than punitive responses such as incarceration. We have a chance here to be leaders, to create something new, to be a model for other places in the country about how we respond to those in the community that do harm to others. I urge the board to look into alternatives, including restorative alternatives. Thank you.
Miss Lynn Stuckey?
Good evening. I'd like to thank the members of this board for giving the public the opportunity to address them this evening. I'm specifically interested in talking about some things regarding the ILPP report and the budget that has been presented to the county. I'd like to thank the board for not only doing the ILPP report, but the Racial Justice Task Force. When the idea was first brought forward, there were people who were very opposed to doing it. They didn't want to do that. They didn't want to look at those issues. They just wanted to build a jail. And that's not the way you handle this. You did the right thing. Thank you for taking the time. Now, going back almost a month ago, I was in this boardroom, and you were discussing the budget, And somebody brought up the fact that you are using $891,000 of public safety sales tax money to pay for utilities at our jails. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everyone who lived in the county when that public safety sales tax was passed, there was never any mention of using that money to fund utilities at the jail. That is very inappropriate. And I wish the cameras had caught the expressions on people's faces when that came up. Because pretty much everyone in this room had the same look on their face that you find a little kid when they've been told to stay away from the cookie and you turn around and they've got their hand in the cookie jar. You were caught and you knew it. So I understand you did it when we needed some money, you thought it'd be okay, but it's not. And it's not easy to break that habit. So what you need to do over the next 4 years is reduce that amount by roughly a quarter every year, roughly $222,750. And frankly, if every year we reduce 10 prisoners at the jail, it's a break-even situation. Actually, it's more than break-even, because I sat in this room during those same series of meetings and I heard the sheriff discuss how every year he assumes that every bed in his jail will be filled every day. And he takes his food budget and he multiplies by that number of prisoners and that number of days, and that's the money he asked for food. And at the end of the budget year, if he has money left over, he puts it in his vehicle fund. So there are two questions. Number one, are you being informed of the amount that's left over? Number two, why isn't some of that money being put into other programs? It was set for food. It wasn't set for vehicles. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in public participation? At this time, I'm closing public, this gentleman. All right, sir, after you're finished speaking, just fill out a paper for us. Thank you. And give us your name.
My name's Mark Enslin. I live in Urbana. And I'm sorry I was late. I have been addressing the county board on the issues related to the jail process, and I've been encouraged by a lot of the things that have happened, and some of the meetings have been, in a way, models for public input and taking that public input seriously. I went to one of the last presentations by ILPP and Cal, who was, when he was in town, in which he mentioned that some of the recommendations that he was in the process of writing already, there was some action starting to implement them even before the formal presentation. And I wanted to encourage continuing thought along these lines. And budgeting sometimes seems like it's a boring and numbers thing, but it can also be the opportunity for a lot of creativity. This is where a lot of implementation happens, and particularly in strained times, it's good to call on the creative abilities that we all have to think holistically about problems and to bring that kind of thinking to how are we going to solve problems. And this holistic thought could extend to thinking of the report that the county paid a fair amount of money for, a really good report, very solidly done and thought through, to not just let it sit there and actually make use of that money that was spent and revisit this document as further input to how to move forward in the coming years about how to reduce unnecessary incarceration, which is, I think, one of the main goals. To consider the reentry component is holistic thinking. You want to think holistically about the situation of jailing and criminal justice. Already the Racial Justice Task Force talked about the restorative justice mindset that Mikhail was just talking about as crucial and important way to move forward. And I think thinking in those terms about some of the specific technical suggestions that were brought forth in the different reports, and also ones that may come up in the process. I think it would be good if you remind yourselves that there can be some evaluation done as things are tried out, and not just say, oh, okay, we have a program, and the program's going, and we can say, hey, look, we did a program. I think it would be wise to keep revisiting the program and see how they're working, so that programs that are effective get further funding and support, and ones that are not as effective as they could be, you ask why. Maybe they need to be altered, maybe they need to be replaced by other ones. I just want to put extra emphasis on the reentry component, because it's really hard to overemphasize how important that is. And you've heard directly from people who are affected by that personally, but globally also it affects all of us. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in public participation? We know this lady. Please announce your name and then give us a sign-in sheet when you're finished. Thank you.
I sure will. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the County Board. My name is Sophia Lewis. I live in the 2000 block of Varder in Urbana. I wasn't quite as sure I was going to say anything else this evening. I've mentioned a lot of things in relation to women in the jail throughout. Just imagine this is a lime green T-shirt that says "No More Jails." Because I also would like to speak to the overall as far as the proposed that has come up. When I saw Ms. Demita Parsley in the purple T-shirt, I knew I had to say something, because she is she's an example of our raison d'etre, our reason to be, and she's one of the first people who our group courted, the Women in the Jail Work Group of Champaign-Urbana Center for Peace and Justice, to be a member amongst us. And several months back, I had read an article that talked about, that mentioned that whenever a state is unable to sell its debt on the market, it's referred to as the Illinois effect, regardless of which state that it is. And so what I would like to highlight for you is that whenever, you know, our systems, be it the educational system, the social services system, our criminal justice system, our social justice system in cohesion, our social services systems in cohesion with the criminal justice system, whenever those systems contribute to the depletion of our human resource capital as opposed to building them up, then just remember that that is our county's contribution to the Illinois effect. And so I would like for each board member to please give this overall plan its vote for this inside-out solution, working on the criminal justice system from the inside to the exterior, more of a form follows function type of solution, with the emphasis being on the function first, and then see whether or not you actually need any of these forms of incarceration, and whether or not they would turn out to be rather minimal once these programs that are of such benefit are implemented. Thank you very much.
One more try. Anyone else would like to speak? All right, I'm going to close public participation. Thank you all very much for coming to public participation. The reason we have it is simply because we like to hear your comments and your suggestions, and our door is always open to the public and our constituents. Let's move on into communications. Is there any communications from the board? Ms. Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I just want to remind everyone that Josh Harkey and I are holding our 5th town meeting this coming Sunday, 1 to 2, at the Champaign Public Library. So this gives more opportunity for people to come and talk to us about the budget, the jail issue, or anything else that's on your mind related to the county.
Any other communication? I have a couple. Mr. Schroeder is asked to be excused. I have in front of me a small stack of green cards. Now I'm going to read it because this is communication to the chair. Dear Chairman Kurtz, I urge you to allocate more public safety sales tax money for programs that keep people out of jail. It's time we prioritize prevention, not construction of new jail cells. Please lead our county on this issue and use our tax money wisely. Thank you. There's got to be at least 100, and I have some more at home. We take seriously comments from our constituents and from our residents, and so we've been in very serious discussions about exactly this issue. So I just wanted the board to know that I have received, I don't know, some others might have received it, but we certainly take my attention. Thank you. Let's move on. I'd like to turn this over now to our Deputy Chair of Finance, Mr. Alex, for decisions regarding the 2014 budget. I turn the gavel over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Kurtz. I hope I won't need the gavel. Welcome. I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. Just as a reminder, we're here to provide direction to the county administrator with regard to the preparation of the fiscal year 2014 budget. And in the spirit of that, I prepared some recommendations as a starting point, which I sent out via email to board members, which I provided tonight. I will run through those real briefly just for the benefit of the people in the audience. Again, this is a starting point. Proposing $600,698 for the deferred facilities repair items identified by the Facilities Committee. This is the original request minus the $149,000 of roof replacement reserve, which was requested. I'm proposing $14,732 for the Planning and Zoning Department for an intern, $26,777 for a 6-month transition of the retiring zoning administrator, $53,108 for full-time investigator position for the Public Defender's Office, $123,564 for the court's proposed pretrial services program, $125,850 for the sheriff's proposed inmate classification system. Recommend adopting fee increases at the level recommended by the county administrator based on the Bellwether study for an estimated revenue amount of $838,487. I recommend reallocating the $37,000 that remains in the 202 Art Bartel Construction Fund to capital asset replacement. Based on the new tax levy, new room under the tax levy resulting from a expiration of an Urbana TIF district, recommend allocating $61,099 to the General Corporate Fund, $7,328 to the Public Health Levy, and $79,200 to the Highway Federal Aid Match Levy in accordance with the request from the Highway Committee. I would say that after funding decisions are made, we need to look at attributing justice-related expenses to the public safety sales tax to offset utility reimbursements, so we make sure we've got things in the most appropriate category. And I add that we need to investigate remaining ILPP and CJTF recommendations, including those related to a reentry program, to determine optimum program elements, suitable partner agencies, and the appropriate balance between the county and other funding sources. My goal in putting these recommendations together was, as a starting point, these are my personal recommendations only. These do not reflect the opinion of the Democratic Caucus or the county administrator. I said a couple months ago that my goal during this budget process was to make sure that nobody was happy, and based on comments I've received so far, I think I've succeeded. Just a couple of comments with regard to the ILPP report, the Community Justice Task Force recommendations. There are a lot of recommendations in that report to be accommodated by a relatively small amount of money. It's obviously not going to be possible to implement all those programs in 1 year, especially given 1 week to prepare the budget recommendations. Therefore, my strategy was to identify the most immediately implementable and well-defined requests in that report, and I've attempted to do that. With regard to the facilities requests, the Facilities Committee has already identified the most dire needs. These are one-time costs, and I placed something of an emphasis on these because in some cases this is work that should have been done at the tune of $100,000 a year for the past 10 years, and instead was basically not done at all. So we've got requests there that have been deferred for 10 years, so I do feel it's important to accommodate those in the budget. I think it's worth making a specific comment about the reentry program because we've received so much feedback on that. Personally, I think there is a dire need for a reentry program in this community. I think it will save the taxpayers money in the long run. I am enthusiastic about seeing one in the community. My issue with it during the budget recommendation process was I've heard costs estimated from $5,000 to $500,000. I've seen there's a lot of expertise in this community that's familiar with these programs. I've seen affirmative steps to look into these. The state's attorney had a meeting with, where she brought down Carl Cannon, who runs a program in Peoria that does youth personal development and employment work, as well as works with adult former federal prisoners by way of a reentry program. We've got expertise in this community, so I feel like this is moving in a positive direction. I was not able to find the money in the budget for it, but hopefully among the 21 other people at the table, people have ideas. With that being said, I think I'll step back and open the floor for motions and discussions. Deb has prepared a presentation. I'm sorry, yeah, no, I'm going to hand it forward to Deb. Deb has prepared a presentation which she sent out as part of the packet, which essentially lists our decision points, right? Where we feel we have revenue, where we feel we have the options to allocate expenses, and she's put together a spreadsheet so that as we have discussions tonight, if we want to do, what ifs or make changes, she can do that, and we can see where we need to get to be balanced. It is my belief that the recommendations I've set forward are essentially balanced. I'll remind the board that any budget that we pass will have about a $950,000 paper deficit, because we are changing from a December to December to a January to January fiscal year. So the upcoming budget is going to reflect basically 13 months of expenses and only 12 months of revenues. So we're essentially, it's a deficit only on paper. So the number that we're shooting at, which is in Deb's report, is if we end up with a budget that shows a deficit of $980,000, that will in fact be a balanced budget. So I guess I will step back. I want the board to do all the talking tonight. I guess I would ask that for the purposes of discussion, if someone would be willing to move these recommendations, that might help get us started. Mr. James and Mr. Langenheim, all those in favor of accepting these recommendations for purpose of discussion? I'm sorry. We can have discussion before we vote, sure. Mr. Harkey.
First off, Mr. Chairman, I will say I'm generally happy with this. I think you did a very good job and have found some very important things, and it's a very hard job to make numbers add up. I know, that's why I'm a writer. My main concern, however, is that first off, we listened to the community talk to us tonight. We've been listening to the community talk to us for 18 months. We listened to ILPP's report. A reentry program seems to be at the very top of everybody's list, more so than a lot of these things that we're looking at. I think, I realize that we have not chosen a specific reentry program, but in my mind, which is it, the chicken or the egg? Do you find a person to build a program, or do you build a program and then find a person to run it? I don't know that we have the direct expertise on this board to build a program, so in my mind, we need a person to come in and build this program as a reentry program. Anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 for this position. And then, as we have mentioned before, yes, we're going to look for federal funding and state funding to run this reentry program, but we need a person to do that first. Secondly, as we can see with the feds and the state, they cannot be counted on to pay for anything right now, as we all know what's happening today with federal government. So I don't think that we should have this position be dependent on that kind of, on federal funding. Furthermore, this is a signal and a commitment to the community. The community has constantly been talking to this board about how we need to move on a reentry program, how we need to move on restorative justice. I have not heard one person say the opposite of that, in fact. I think we need to make a commitment to the community that we are going to put our money where our mouth is and create a line item for this reentry program. Be that a line item that we can put X amount of dollars in, a line item that we can put X amount of dollars in to create at least the opening position that can then go out and look for further funding to add staff, to add programming, and do that with the help of the new deputy director. Justice delayed is justice denied. If we put this off another year till next year's budget report, how many more people will fail to go through the system? This is also a build a program. We are a leading community. We have a huge university here. We have great access to very many intelligent people. The Community Justice Task Force and everyone involved with that. We can take Pittsburgh's program, we can take these other programs that we've been introduced to and modify it and build our own that fits our community. And that's going to take someone from this community in this position to do that. And again, you know, the problems of this report are not going to be dealt with in this budget cycle. They're not going to be dealt with entirely in the next one. This is a continuous thing we're going to have to deal with, but I think we make this step on something big in the beginning to take our public input seriously. And therefore, I would recommend, as a starting point, that we consider taking this money out of the $600,000 facilities line item. And I would start with $200,000 to cover this position. The reason I would take it from facilities is that way, honestly, it should be $300,000, so we're splitting evenly between facilities and programming on justice, but I know where realities lie on what this request will be. I also think that it makes another point to the community that we are not going to build, that we are going to program to a solution in this. The community, again, is not for the building, and I realize, again, as a member of the Facilities Committee, that this money is going towards many things other than just the jail, but when we look at the importance of facilities in general versus the importance of programming, I think we need to find a better balance on the side of programming. And I also want to add, if we can put $600,000 a year in a fund for future facility spending, because again, this $600,000 is not earmarked for what is going to be built. This is money going in a hole for when things come up that we are going to fix. If we can do that for facilities money, we can do that for programming money for justice. We can put money away for future positions. So I would like to see the line item for facilities reduced to $400,698 and have $200,000 put in a line item specifically for justice and justice programming. And I so move.
Okay, I'm going to hold you here while I confer with the county administrator. I want to make sure that we get your motion in a form that's actually understood. That's an amendment. Assume you're moving that as an amendment. Absolutely.
One thing first. Currently, based on all the recommendations that have been incorporated that were in Mr. Alex's motion, there is $81,136 left that could be appropriated, and you would still be at your fund balance goal. In answer to your question, if we don't know exactly how the money is to be spent right at this point, there is a line item called grants and contributions in the general county budget, which is controlled by decisions made by the county board. We could add to that line item whatever appropriation it is you would want for a reentry program that you don't yet know how to spend the money.
Right.
If you end up putting the money in personnel, it will require a 2/3 budget transfer to move it from non-personnel to personnel spending.
If I could, Deb, thank you. And if you find a better place to come up with this money than pulling it right out of that facilities line, I'm more than happy to look for it. I am a facilities committee member and want to have Mr. James have his money. However, and also I appreciate your point on the line item. I want this to be in a nice, flexible line item that we can dole this out, be it for a position or for a contract with a group to do this, or you know, extra money to do the study, whatever necessary. So yes.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm just going to keep monitoring here until we get your motion clarified. Is it fair to say then that you are moving to amend the recommendations to add a line item, to add $200,000 to the grants and contributions line item for the purpose of justice, specifically reentry, or justice programming in general? Justice programming, which may include reentry program. And we'll worry about it being balanced later, but I want to get that out there.
So we want grants.
Well, it doesn't matter, the budget will be 81,000, Debbie. I mean, I'd rather get your motion in there to add this and then decide what to do with it. Okay, so is there a second for Mr. Harkey's motion to add, to amend the recommendations? Ms. Berkson. Now that we have the motion, I think I saw Ms. Petrie's hand up first. Then Mr. James.
Thank you very much.
Again, if I could ask you, let's confine this to, do we have the $200,000 in that line item? Or do we create the $200,000 line item?
I'm speaking to that.
Okay.
Yes, I am supportive of that. I am also supportive of using money from number one, which is the facility repair. And the reason for that is I have spoken long and hard the importance of leveraging writing for grants for facilities. And I look at all the money listed here for facility maintenance, and 90% of the items listed here, there is funding from DCEO. So I do not think this is debilitating anything that the Facilities Committee has on their legitimate agenda of getting accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James.
I guess I would just say when I hear the comments, there's a lot of merit to a lot of things that comes before this board, but we've got to be mindful that, like in our own lives, there's only X amount of money in our pocket to do the things we'd like to do or things that we wish we could do. I mean, I wish I could go to Disneyland every year with my family, but I can't. The budget on the facilities was set after a long and hard look at things, and some of it already was removed, which is one of them things in life that we have to agree on. But as we all know, the downtown jail didn't happen overnight. It fell apart because no maintenance was being done by this board, and I wasn't on the board at the time to help make those decisions. But I think when we start cutting all the time to pay for new programs, my constituents are telling me we're acting like state and federal government. We're not paying our bills. We're not doing what we were designed to do with the money that's coming in, and we keep adding new programs. To all the people that spoke, a lot of the programs I hear about are out there. They're just so spread out, and they keep taking away from the things that we need to get society back to. When I hear about jobs, I know a lot of kids out of college that can't find jobs. We don't have a program for them. They fend for themselves. I know it's hard to find a job. So when we start cutting budgets and we start letting our buildings fall apart, we're going to have a lot more issues, and then we're going to be cutting staff like we have before just to pay the bills we have to pay. I agree some of these things have merit. I agree we need to look at them, but we can't keep adding programs that we can't fund realistically, and nor do we want to raise taxes on everybody in this room, because that'll be the next gripe. So I think some of the comments are fine, but we need to maintain what we have. And when I hear the comments about grant money, we know it's all going away. And I would say some of these things that's before us are going to come in higher than what's written down on this paper, because that's already occurring. So I'm pleading with this board. We put enough off for so long. The sheriff's done without squad cars. We're putting his staff in jeopardy of accidents and what have you. We keep going back to piecemeal and stuff. Let's work with what we have. Chris has come up with what I feel is good. I wish it was more favorable toward buildings and personnel that we have, but let's not keep creating programs on the backs of the people that are all out there. I hear these groups, but there's a lot of people that don't come to these meetings, and I'll tell you, in the coffee shops I go to, they are tired of government creating programs.
Ms. Berkson, did you have your hand up? Thank you.
It's just a question for Deb. Where you're putting this 200,000, is it already available for personnel, or would it be a shift to do that? And if so, is there a place we can put it where it's already personnel?
It's on. No, where you're putting it is in a non-personnel line item. You don't know it. If this ends up being a contract where you don't actually hire an employee of Champaign County, but you fund an individual or a program to provide these services, it's a simple majority of the board to expend this money. It's budgeted. The only way it would require a supermajority is if you decide to create a position and have this reentry program coordinator be a Champaign County employee, then it would need to come out of personnel, and that would require a supermajority, 15 votes to approve.
Thank you. Mr. Kurtz.
I understand both sides. But I want you to understand, from my perspective, why we haven't been able to come up with programs that can help. But the point being is that if we could have a reentry program now, over the long run, we've always said, you know, spend money now and what will happen in the future. But the key is that programs like this will, over time, repay itself many times over. If we can reduce recidivism, if we can reduce reentry back into the prison system, we can save tens of thousands of dollars for every prisoner that we don't reincarcerate. And that's why I think we need to look at the long term. Now, I've already discussed with Dr. Cal, and he has forwarded to me a workable reentry program from Pittsburgh. I have it as a model, and we have a couple of models that we're working with, and I think if we look at those, we can certainly see where in the long run we can save money over time rather than worry about expending it now. So I'm in support of a reentry program. I think over time it will help us to save money and perhaps build some better lives for those like the young lady who is having so much difficulty in finding a job or reentering back into the community. So I'm in support of a separate line item for this item.
Mr. Quisenberry.
And Mr. McGuire, too. I'm going to ask some.
1 second, please. Please, I appreciate that you appreciate some of the statements here, and you want to applaud. I would appreciate it so we, for time and so, please don't applaud everybody who has something you want to hear. Okay, thank you.
I was hoping for applause, Al. Now you've dampened it. So I'm going to ask a few questions, and then I have some things to say. So, question I have about the 200,000, where it's at. Would I be right in assuming that if the sheriff determines that there are minor modifications in support of things that need to be done to better support women in jail or mental health or health problems in the jail, that this could be the place where we go for that money as opposed to back to facilities line item? Would that be a fair assumption?
I mean, it's up to this board. I had assumed, and in my recommendation, I had mentioned that I mean, the reason that I didn't, that I go back to something Mr. Harkey said about the facilities being sort of general reserve. There were specific items, there were $600,698 worth of specific line items that needed replacement that went into the Facilities Committee request, which is where this number came from. However, I had mentioned in my recommendation that the Facilities Committee and the new Facilities Director need to be looking for grant funding to try to offset that, and that the sheriff may be bringing a request for modifications to satellite jail. So I guess
Right.
implicit in my recommendation was the assumption that would probably, that the sheriff would have to find something in the facilities line that his request was more important than, and that would come out of the facilities line. Now,
I
if the
get-
proposal here is to take, I guess at this point, I mean, reading the crystal ball, it's 81,000 from unallocated funds and 120 some from the facilities, 119 from the facilities line. And along with that goes the responsibility for accommodating the sheriff's partition request or whatever it is out of this facilities line, out of this justice line. I think that would be fine with me, but
Well,
I only get one vote.
I'm only asking because Mr. Hartke said justice programs, and that would be an item responding to recommendations from ILPP's report, but not necessarily meeting the standard of what I would call programmatic.
I'll let you go to this, Josh, since it's your motion.
Yeah, no, I mean, my understanding is this is going to be an extremely flexible budget line, and then we, as a board, can
Okay.
determine how to spend it. And yeah, I would not be opposed if it ends up, you know, they need $10,000 in equipment to put up partitions, and we can pull it out of this line, and we still are going to have money, the 100,000 I think is necessary for the reentry. I'd be happy to vote with that and use this money for furtherance of that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. No, that was my question, and I said I had things to say. Yeah, I believe totally in the fact that we need to fund reentry. I will point out that Cal said that we should depend on other funding for reentry as well. He said, in fact, I think he said, you shouldn't pay for it, the state and federal grant should pay for it. But I don't believe that that can happen without some amount of seed funding. I'm also very interested in seeing what our new deputy county administrator for finance can do in this area, because that is, I'm sure Deb has plenty of plans for that person, but I think we have some plans for that person as well. I'm going to state, as a facilities committee member who voted for these items to be on here, what I voted was a recommendation that I knew would be part of the discussion of budget. So when I make a recommendation, I don't necessarily expect all of my recommendation to be accepted. So I don't have any problem going back and looking at this number, which I know we struggled over and looked at specific items. I'm sure, Josh, you don't have specific ones you're ready to take off that list. And it may be a little disingenuous for us to do this, since some of those things on that list, if they fail, we're going to have to do anyway. But I'm going to say right now that if we set aside this $200,000 line item, and that means that some things happen and we go deficit 30, 40,000 in this year, I'm going to be okay with that. We can't plan for that. We don't know which things might fail, what we might have to deal with, but I think that acting on these reports and what we have gotten is important enough that we have to put some money there. This area is at such a disadvantage in this process because there is nobody in the system right now to build the framework, build what the program looks like, do this kind of work, and come lobby us as a staff member to make it happen. So we're going to have to tolerate a little bit of ambiguity here. That's the way it is. Now, if we can fund most of it through grant funding, through soft money, and that has its own implications, great. That gives us more headroom. We get both things, right? We get other options. So I'm a little uncomfortable with the $200,000 number. I'm concerned that that is a little bit higher than I expected to be at without more specific details about it. But at this point, I think it's what we have to do to make progress on the recommendations that we received. I am speaking mostly to the $200,000. I think there are other opportunities other than just facilities on this current list that we could pick at a little bit, that we might be able to, in addition to that 81,000, squeeze out a few other tens of thousands of dollars and not hurt the facility number as much. And I will talk to that once we get through this.
Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry. I think I'm going to go to Mr. Kibler since he hasn't spoken yet.
Thank you. So one quick question, then a comment. Actually, I'll flip them. While I'm not adverse to this proposal, I think it's a well-constructed proposal, I'm more concerned and want to consider more of the mental health aspect if we're going to start putting $200,000 into the pot for something specifically out of grants. Mental health is something that I feel like this board needs to have more of a focus rather than less. Even with the reentry program, I can understand the merits, but quite frankly, when you talk about something from the heart, mental health is something that means more dear to my heart. So if that offends anybody, I'm sorry, but that is something I feel like this board has to approach before it starts talking about another program respective to the jail program. That said, I did want to make a clarification. I'm just curious because something that was said made me pose this question. You mentioned that it's going against the grants line item. I don't have the budget in front of me. Do we already have money set aside for the grants line item that can already pull out this $200K, or is this brand new monies that would go into the line item?
Okay, understand, this is in the general corporate fund at this point in the general county budget, and a grants and contributions line item does not currently exist there, but can easily be established, and that's where this would be. The mental health fund is entirely separate.
Okay, so this is a brand-new line item, not something that's being appended to or pulled from.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Although I guess if I could parse your question, if you're speaking to mental health issues related to the justice system or individuals incarcerated or in contact with the justice system, I would say that would probably fall under Mr. Harkey's definition. If it's general mental health services to the community as a whole, my guess is it would not.
That's part of my concern, almost what Mr. Quisenberry also mentioned. It's a blank check to a very generic item that anybody can pluck from. And I would like to see something more specific as opposed to generic in this case, just so that we know exactly what we're voting on, because again, my interpretation of where I would want that money to go is going to be significantly different than somebody else's, and I would like to talk about that now as opposed to try to fight it out later, but that's my personal opinion.
Let's hear from the other first-timers, and then we'll come back and see if we can hash that out. Mr. McGuire was next.
Okay, let me take a second. I'm not against the reentry program either. The issue I have is a lot of these other line items have some, definition to them. These programs and the things that we're talking about, there's impact throughout the budget on what happens, whether it's the facilities committee, whether it's the general budget of the county, all these things. But the reentry program, we don't know who's doing it, what's doing it, how it's going to be accomplished. The numbers went from $155,000 to $200,000. We just raised the cost of the insurance to the employees, and they're going to be funding whatever happens with this program. When we raise the cost to the taxpayers, that impacts the jobs of the community that the people will be looking for in the reentry program. It's not that I don't want to try to do something like this, because I'd like to see something happen with reentry. It's that I want to have some plan to do that. And when we're talking about taking money out of facilities, this county's been through about 8-10 years of trying to control the costs of what happens to the buildings. I work for facilities and services. These things, this is a list. This is a list of chillers, heaters, automated systems. We're not talking about maintenance, we're talking about repairs. When I walk through this building and it's raining inside the building, and I say this because I did it, it's raining inside the building harder than it is outside the building. When it costs $160,000 to replace a chiller, it costs $160,000 to replace it. It's just not like you can just divert the money when you want to, because when you have to replace the roof, you have to replace a chiller, it has to be done, and it's been done recently. I understand what you're talking about when you want to do these things, because I'd like to see it done. And this list, there's $300,000, the court diversion, the reclassification, investigator. Mental health is also doing some programs. There's a youth diversion program that's starting to happen. I think we should just roll this out in an organized way with the programs defined and see what RPC does with reentry and find a program that really works, rather than just deciding, throwing out $200,000 where we don't know where it's going to go, because it all affects the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Langenheim, and I apologize if I got you two out of order.
Well, that's all right. I was going to ask a question, but I'd like to. I was going to ask a question, but I think you just answered it for me. We're referring to this list here. It says County Board Decision Points Facility Project Funding included in the budget. Is that's what we're talking about, pairing? Well,
The specific facilities request that Mr. McGuire was referring to in his comment are the ones that are listed in that decision point document. It says they are part of the budget, but it's sort of academic at this point.
okay, but these are the things we're referring to.
Yes, sir.
Well, I would like to join with him and with anybody that ever had a leaky roof. You tamper with maintenance of these buildings that you have to live in and work in at your peril. And we went through that list, which was much longer, and cut it down to what was considered to be really essential. Now, I'm certainly in favor of the reentry project. I want to see it funded, but I'm not sure I want to take it off of the roof repairs.
Thank you, Mr. Langenheim. Ms. Schwartz is next, I believe. I understand. I think that was just a comment, not an amendment.
2 points. I think, first of all, the 200,000, just to clarify, we're not really throwing money out and say whoever wants you to come and get it. We're putting money in the budget so that if we want to eventually fund something very specific, we'll have the option to fund it, whereas if we don't put it as a line item, we won't have an option to do it. The second point I wanted to make is I think nobody was talking, but I think we should talk about the drug court, which is losing the federal funding, and I would like to ask Deb if the 200,000 could possibly, the way it's structured, could we possibly take from there and fund the drug court, at least partially, because this is an existing program that we know is very successful, run by Judge Ford, that's losing its federal funding, and I think does have a track record, so unlike the reentry, which is a little bit more vague, there is something that we probably should think about putting money. So if we put 200,000, can we allocate it?
I think this raises a very important point, which is before this were to go in the budget, we would need to have a reasonable discussion here as to what exactly this money could be spent on, because I think we've already heard more than $200,000 worth of ways to spend this $200,000. Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry, Deb.
I would suggest that if you put this $200,000 in the budget and you don't know exactly where it goes or who it's going to be spent on, that this goes in the budget with the caveat that nothing gets spent from this line item without the board's direction. And certainly, if the board gave direction to take a portion of this and fund drug court, then that's what would happen. If the board gives direction to take another portion of it and fund a reentry program, then that's what would happen. The only caveat I would add is drug court is a separate fund. You would be doing a transfer. You can expend it from general corporate because you've budgeted it. But drug court doesn't currently anticipate that revenue, so they would need a budget amendment to indicate that they were receiving the funding so that they could spend it. That takes 2/3.
Mr. Harper, are you next?
I believe Jim and Jeff answered a lot of my stuff there. I just sat here, I'm not against any of these programs. They all sound like they're a help to everybody. My first concern, I wasn't here 18 months ago, I've only been here 10 months. And all the discussions I've heard, one of my first priorities would be the mental health issue. And I think that's something, because Dan Walsh doesn't need to be handling it in the jail, or we need the facilities there to do it. But where's the money come from? I mean, we're a county that has over $44 million worth of debt. I don't understand where the money is going to come from new programs. And if you don't maintain buildings, anybody that's ever owned something, they will fall down. Just comments.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll go back to Mr. Harkey, I think was next, then you, Ms. Petrie.
Okay. First off, we are not raising taxes here. We are not costing the taxpayer any money. We are shifting priorities from various other sundry things, and I'm not saying specifically only facilities. We can find this money in some other places if that's necessary. But it seems to be the most convenient and the most struggling. Secondly, if we put $480,000 in a pot for facility spending, that's more than this county has put in that pot in a long darn time. Thirdly, yes, there's a list of things potentially to be replaced, but those have to actually blow out before we have to replace them. The goal here is not, and I was told from the beginning, that when we have these replacement schedules on our roofs and our chillers, that doesn't mean 14 years is up, we replace that roof. That means at 14 years, we hope that roof might last us another 2 or 3. And also, the idea is that we're going to be putting this $500,000 in this pot every year annually. That's kind of how we're budgeting this. I think that's going to be a lot of money for us to look on facilities repair, a lot more than this county has had in the past. And we can continue to discount these, quote, programs as things that just may or may not work and we like, but you cannot pay lip service to how we want these programs and not find the ways to fund them. That's just, it is not logically consistent. And I tell you, you know, Pittsburgh, in that plan, I believe the number were they roughly reduced their recidivism by 50%. If 50% of the people that come out and would normally go back in no longer go back in, we are going to be saving money over the next several years with reentry. And also, let me add, I love the mental health idea, guys, and I'd be happy to find ways to spend portions of this $200 grand on mental health.
Thank you, Mr. Harkey. Ms. Petrie is next.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to be careful not to tread too much away from the amendment. The conversation so far disregards the possibility of any monies to solve some of these facility issues from DCEO. I mean, DCEO is running workshops all over the state saying, we have gobs of money, come to us and get it. If you figure we can get 30% of money from DCEO to cover the costs that are up there for facilities, we're at $180,000 alone, right there. Second, there are other places that we can conjure up, or conjure, that's a bad term, shifts of monies around. One is we have $61,000 from the TIF that's going into General Corp. That's some money we could use. In the report from ILPP, there was a mention of revisiting the cost to secure the courthouse. That's something that we have not touched on. I realize that's not directly on the amendment, but this is another place where we can have a conversation concerning releasing money that has been pointed in one direction and repointed to another direction. And doing some of that, we can get a larger basket of money to cover these programs. And the one thing I really want to underline, I taught social planning for years, and the two things that cause failure from any report, especially a report on social programs, is one, that they are not funded upfront in a good, consistent manner that they can get legs for their program, and or show that they're a program that they then can go out for federal grant money. And second is, because of that happening, then they're not implemented, and we put ourselves in the situation where the community is going to say, well, you just spent $144,000 on this report, and everybody's saying it's a great report, but look, you failed. So we really should not be setting ourselves up to put ourselves in that position and take some strong stances on getting these programs started in a very strong way. And I also agree mental health does need some more infusion. But my caveat on the infusion of any monies into the program, as much as I support all these programs, is that they have to have a evaluative part to any of these programs. We have not done this, we do not leverage this, and this is a huge mistake because we have no idea. We just put over $7 million for developmental disabilities and mental health board programs, and we have no factors that show us whether they are successful or whether they are not successful, and we need to start doing this.
Thank you, Ms. Petrie. Ms. Bergson.
Couple of things about, people keep saying we've got to be specific about this 200,000, but the whole justice budget is in flux, and a long overdue flux, but a flux. We don't know if the sheriff saves as much money as Cal says, he'll have money to do all his repairs by himself. On the other hand, if it doesn't work out quite that way, he's going to need some of our money. Maybe reentry will be cheap, and maybe it won't. We don't know when this many factors are changing where the holes are going to appear. So I don't think we should be, I think we should keep control over this money, but I don't think we should be specific about it at all. And the other point I wanted to make is everyone seems to be agreed that facilities are more important than people. When facilities need help, they get it. Whereas when people need help, so what? And I think it's time that, we consider that the balance between facilities and people be more seriously considered.
Mr. Esri is next.
Yes, with the idea of this 200,000 coming strictly from facilities, and Mr. Harkey saying, and he's correct in that we don't, just because it's at its, say the roof is at its 14-year, 15-year lifespan, we automatically replace it. but there is a thing called preventative maintenance. I have never, well, I would say that most people who own a car or a house do what's called preventative maintenance. Specifically with a car, I would contend that you're a pretty poor car owner, driver, if you wait for your tires to blow out because the cords were showing and you didn't replace them and you just drove them until they were bald. And next thing you know, you have a tire blowout and you cause a wreck. That's what we're talking about with facilities that can happen. The chiller, you can keep limping it along, but when it goes, it's gonna go. That could be on a holiday, and we're gonna pay big time more than this $159,000, say, for a chiller, because it's having to be replaced on a holiday. If it's scheduled and we know what it can cost, then we can budget for it and cross it off the line item. If we just wait for it to go and go big time to where we have to replace it, we're gonna pay for it big time. You keep throwing pennies at it, and then you're spending hundreds of dollars. Some of these are specific lists of items. They won't necessarily all happen anyway in this budget, but there is if something else comes up, a different chiller or a different roof comes up, that would probably take priority over some of these. But there needs to be money in for facilities. Facilities are owned by the taxpayers, every taxpayer of this county. The programs are good, but the programs really and truly don't affect every taxpayer of this county. That's a fact, in that they don't directly affect every person in terms of their lifestyle. How to put this in words? Monetarily, that the county spends, it affects them. But if I am not putting myself out there in a position to get into the system to begin with, the reentry program isn't going to affect me. I'm sorry, it's not. In terms of my personal life, the way I personally conduct my life. That's all.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make a comment here. I'm trying to, because it's a committee meeting, I'm trying to give some leeway. But the real motion is $200,000 in the grants and contributions line. And I think that's about it. I mean, there's been lip service paid to using it for justice programs, but once it's there, and the board can basically do whatever it wants with it, regardless of what our intentions are at this point. So I'm going to ask, I mean, I think it's fine to hear comments about relative priorities of facilities versus other things, but let's try to focus on the allocation of the $200,000, and then I'm sure we're going to have another round here where we have motions to decide what to take it out of. Mr. Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually like your proposal. I think we should have adopted it and got by all of this. I've sat here for about 13 years, I guess, watching us do just what you all are trying to do to the facilities again tonight. And we take facilities as we don't need the money today, so we'll do something else with it. And we've done that for 13 years, and that's why we're in the mess we're in today, and we're starting to do it all over again. I will not support this. I think facilities needs to have, actually, this isn't enough money for facilities to be carrying as a balance. But it's a start, and I think it's important that we start tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Jay. Mr. Kibler, I believe, is next, and then Ms. Michaels. You're right, Mr. Richards is not. Ms. Michaels, and Mr. Richards, and then Ms. Michaels.
I think we've heard from the discussion tonight exactly why we need to get into the habit of putting this $200,000 in here. We have for years heard on budget after budget, we don't have the money, we have to pay for other programs, we have to fix buildings. We need to start making a down payment on our future, take some of these ILPP recommendations and start working them in. I would disagree that these programs in general don't affect everybody. Because if we can reduce recidivism, if we can reduce crime in this county, you don't have to be in the criminal justice system to not have your house broken into. These are things that affect everybody. This affects the whole county. If we are are working on programs that are reducing crime in this county, that is something that affects everybody. And we know that if we push it to next year, we're going to have the same conversation about how we don't have the money, we don't know what we want to spend it on. We need to put this $200,000 in here now. I know it's going to go quickly, and we also need to have the discussion independently on facilities about how we get some of the state grant funds that we are eligible for and reduce the amount of money that we need to spend on that while doing all the repairs.
I have a couple of, I'm sorry, I apologize, I got it. All the beans and corn have been taken out around the field, so I get to feel it. I just have a couple questions with regard to this. You know, once again, probably paraphrasing that I understand we need some kind of programs or whatever. That's not something we were prepared to look at with the items that we have and the money that we have right now. I appreciated that we were taking money away from some of the other areas in order to make our budget balanced. And so therefore, I feel that that 200,000 is a pretty good chunk of money to be coming from one or even or two or three areas and not have a program. I don't know that could we not finish with what we started and then reevaluate, if you will, some of the areas that we see as potential to put money into this? I mean, do we have to create that line item tonight? Because even after the 13th month, I think we're still in a hole. And I would like to see items that are, you know, hard and fast be taken care of first. And then see where do we come up with money to fund these programs and go from that nature. It's hard to, you know, take your checkbook and say, okay, I've got to pay these monthly bills, and okay, then I've got leftover. Let's see what we can squeeze out of this or next month to put into this line item. Does this have to be voted on tonight? Do we have to put the, you know, can we do something different on the dollar amount? Or do we just create the line item and figure a dollar amount later after we've kind of figured out, massage the budget and find out where we actually can take it from, where we take it from from several different departments instead of just one?
Well, from a procedural standpoint, I mean, the motion that's on the floor is to create a line item and put $200,000 in it. There could be an amendment to change the dollar amount. There could be later motions to specify. I mean, if this motion succeeds, the budget's going to be $180,000 in the hole. Excuse me, $118,000 in the hole, and somebody's going to have to make a motion to decide where to get that money out of here before I let everybody go home. But I think the answer to your question is yes. I mean, or you could move to defer it. I mean, I would certainly like to see us give guidance to Deb tonight, because she's got to start getting the budget put together. I mean, we scheduled this special meeting so we'd have an extended amount of time to talk about it.
Then I'd
So
like
I guess
to-
I don't really know the answer to your
If I could
question.
move to defer this, adding this line item till she can go through it. Oh, it is down.
We have next cap.
Oh, at the next committee of the whole meeting?
Yeah,
When?
I can't prevent you from making the motion. Is there a second?
I'd like-
Yeah,
I'd like
I'm not quite sure.
I'd like
sure
to
what you're
defer
doing here.
this item till we can come up with a better number for the budget purpose.
Yeah, actually, I guess technically you can't, because it's an amendment to the main motion. You could,
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
I mean, I think we will move toward a resolution tonight, if you'll bear with us. Mr. Maxwell. Sorry, I had somebody before you. Mr. Barr already spoke. Let's go to Mr. Maxwell, since you haven't spoken first.
Thank you. I tend to agree with a lot of the speakers tonight. Some of these programs, I think, do have some merit, and but we seem to be in this situation because the states and Fed governments have failed in their duty to take care of the folks that are their prisoners, basically, that they're sending back to us. And they're not sending us any money to deal with it. I'm willing to do what we can, but we have to understand we can't take the place of the state and federal governments. We just simply don't have the resources in this county to do it. We can do what we can do. We can maybe do it smarter than they can do, and that's part of what I hope we will eventually do, and the programs that we do create. The sheriff has proposed a reasonable program. He's made a couple suggestions. He wants time to try them and to see if they do affect the numbers. And I suggest we let his recommendations run and maybe fund what he's proposed. Mr. Quisenberry raised a good point. Do we need the $200,000 to start a seed program? Perhaps we could get by with less money, and maybe even $100,000 for this first year for that particular program might be sufficient. So those would be the comments I have. And again, I think that we do need to do some things along the lines of trying to get the jail population down and to spend the money in a smarter way than we've done possibly we've done in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Mr. McGuire, I think you're next.
I'll make this fast. I guess the question comes, where's the money come from? And we keep talking about facilities, and people have talked about getting grants, which I've been here about 9 months, and I keep hearing that we're going to get grants, and I don't see grants coming. I know there's been a few, so maybe that's a possibility. And we try to explain, some of us, why it's more expensive to put the maintenance off on some of these facilities, like the roofs. And, you know, when you have pieces of equipment and you don't do proper maintenance, it just doesn't take out part of that piece of equipment, takes out bigger parts of it. But I'll explain one part, where somewhere in the building, the leaks, you know, through the roofs have not only taken out the ceilings, but taken out copiers and printers in the building, costing thousands of dollars. So these costs just aren't, you know, the cost of whatever you have listed here, but and those maintenance costs, but other pieces of equipment, larger costs of the equipment. So the question is, where does the money come from? The budget's set mostly here, and now we're deciding whether we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in something that's not defined.
Thank you, Ms. Berkson.
We're down to 118,000 coming from somewhere, not 200,000. Maybe if the 200,000 were 150 and the amount that came from somewhere else were 68,000, more people could see that we would be making good use of our money and still having enough money to get some of these seed programs started.
Thank you. Ms. Schwartz, I think, was next. If I'm leaving somebody behind, holler out. Thank you.
We have 37,000 that I'm trying to talk again about, I think people are talking about the 200, but they're actually talking about where they're going to take it from. So we should talk about both at the same time. The 37,000 from Art Bartel, if we move that to General Corp, then that would be 37,000 less that need to come out of facilities.
It would come out of somewhere else, though.
What's that?
It would come out of somewhere else.
Capital asset replacement. That's where it's currently going, which I don't think anybody feels really strongly about at this point. So if we can take it out of the capital asset replacement, which nobody feels really strongly about, and put it into that, then if we keep the 200,000 number, then we're down to now 80 that need to come out of facilities. Or if we want an amendment and make it 120 for this grant, then we have 0 coming out of facilities. So I'm not sure where, but anyway, I think we should stop talking about 200 coming out of facilities, because we are now down to 80,000.
I think I've got Mr. Kibler, and then Mr. Quisenberry, and then Mr. Rick.
Hey,
Yes.
what about Ralph?
So,
I'm sorry, I didn't see Ralph there. If I missed you.
I'm going to be disruptive. I'd like to call the question.
Okay. Rocket, we went through this last week. Calling question requires 2/3. All in favor of ending debate, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, Aye. Ask for a show of hands. Ending debate. Not ending debate. That motion fails. I have Mr. Kibler.
Thank you, sir. One of the things I also wanted to mention specifically on this $200,000 item is that we do have representation from other entities here, and hope that the group is as vociferous with those organizations such as our school boards and other city councils, because honestly, prevention is the key to this whole thing. With respect to the $200,000 amount, and this is why I voted no, I cannot vote yes for any amount without it being specifically line item to what we're going to do it for. So if it's 75,000, there's a lot of monies that are line item. In this case, this is a very generic statement. I would like to see, if you want 200,000 for it, then ask for 200,000 for exactly this. If you want 75, or if we have 75, I'd like to see a specific dollar amount for a specific program or entity we want to try. That's just my request. Otherwise, I have to vote no.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this issue? Mr. Hartke, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry. No, it's fine. Please help me keep track of this.
Yeah, I guess. I want to suggest something here. This is a committee, okay? This is where we work things out. Now, some folks may be uncomfortable with this, but in my mind, if we vote on this and put it on there, then we have work to do to go back and figure out where it comes from. That may be some from facilities. That may mean that before we're done tonight, we come back to this number and have to reduce it some because we realize we can't get consensus. So I feel everybody kind of leading up to this is the vote. This is not the vote. This is a committee work. If we put it on there and it doesn't balance, we have to do work to get it back to balance. And if you think of this as an iterative process, step, 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 I think you'll be much more comfortable with it. And to Mr. Kibler's comment about having specific things on here, I'm sorry, I know where you're coming from. I know you want metrics. I know what you're thinking, but this is a place where we cannot make progress if we aren't tolerant of some ambiguity, because there is no staff member right now that's going to work on satisfying that to the degree that you want it. And we don't know everything we need to know to figure out how to do it. I am comfortable with that ambiguity. I am comfortable with it because to spend out of this, it's going to have to come back to the board, and it's going to, in some cases, need a simple majority. Or if we decide we need personnel to do it, it's going to take a lot more. It's going to take a supermajority. So that's why I'm willing to tolerate that ambiguity, to get motion on this so that we can get to the point where we are helping people and saving money in the process. We got to do this to save money down the road. So,
Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry. I think that's a point worth reiterating, that we're not actually spending the money. If we do this, we allocate the money to a line item in the budget, which later it would require the board's approval to spend. Mr. Richards, am I doing this right? And then Mr. Kibler? Then
I
Mr.
just
Hartke?
wanted to call the question, and I'm still in favor of us wrapping it up.
Question's been called and seconded. All those in favor of ending discussion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
I
I think that means we'll vote on Mr. Hartke's amendment, and if I can clarify, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, let me make sure I'm doing this right. This is a motion to add to the draft budget $200,000 to a grants and contributions line in the general county budget, which would require a majority of the board to approve any spending of, or a supermajority of the board to approve transferring to a personnel-related line item or a different fund. I'm not surprised. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Berkson? Esri? Harper? Hartke? Yes. James? No. Jay?
No.
Kibler?
No.
Kurtz?
Yes.
Langenheim? Yes. Maxwell?
No.
McGuire?
No.
Michaels? No. Mitchell? Not here. Petrie? Yes. Quisenberry?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Rosales?
Yes.
Schwartz? Alex?
Yes. That motion passes. If you can put that in the draft budget, we're not going home. We're going to take a break, and when we come back from our 7.5-minute break, we will talk about where we're going to find this money or whether we in fact have this money at all. Did Diane go home? Okay, is it, oh, and there's Geraldo. Have we got everybody? Okay, let's resume. We currently are about $120,000 short of balanced, 118,000 short of balance. We have adopted the recommendations. Actually, I'm sorry, we need to vote on the main motion, Mr. Hart, right? Oh, I'm sorry, we're still on the main motion. Okay, fine. May I have, would anybody like to make a motion? I see Ms. Schwartz's hand. Ms. Schwartz.
I would like to move that we transfer $37,000 from the Art Bartel Construction Fund to General Corp. My motion is that we transfer $37,000 from the Art Bartel Construction Fund to General Corp.
Okay, so instead of capital asset replacement, you want it to go to General Corp.
To cover part of that
That's item
118,000.
number, that would change item number 8.
Yes.
Is there a second? Mr. Rosales seconded. In discussion, Mr. Kibler.
Ms. Busey, what is the current level of the capital asset replacement, or what will it be at if we do not put it into this 37 grand into it?
You're asking me for the current budget for capital asset replacement for next year? The $37,000 was not included in that budget when it was presented to you.
What's the, do we
What
have the
is it
dollar
now,
amount?
though? So just kind of curious how much we'd be bumping that up. I know it's only 37 grand, but I'm just curious on the current number.
The current number for the total capital asset replacement fund?
Does anybody else, want to speak to this? I could take names while Deb's looking this up. I'll get Mr. Quisenberry next.
I would like to support this change because it works towards reducing that deficit number. And since the budget we've already looked at so far did not have it incorporated, I don't think we're missing a lot by doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry. Mr. Kurtz.
I would also like to support that motion. I think that we'll start to be able to balance the budget if we make some moves here. I think this is a good start.
Thank you, Mr. Kurtz. Mr. Richards.
I'm just wondering, are there any negative consequences from transferring this 37,000, or are there any issues with that being taken away from the capital asset replacement?
We're always trying to raise the capital asset replacement fund balance. Ms. Schwartz?
I don't think we had any plans for that. I think the sole purpose was to close a fund that we were not using anymore, and we didn't probably think carefully about where we're putting it, or we would have put it in general corporate to begin with. So I don't see any downside to not putting it where we didn't plan to use it to begin with.
I'm going to plead the fifth on that one.
The revenue and capital asset replacement, am I looking at the right one? I'm looking at public safety. Oh, wrong one, sorry. 105.
Anybody else want to waste some time while we wait for Deb? Mr. Quisenberry.
This will just take a second.
I'm going to ask a question about this because I do believe, is that the place that we would potentially take money from if there is expenses associated with yielding the rights for the water main that needs to be handled?
The Art Bartel easement issue.
That's why we're not spending it until the fiscal 2014 budget. but at this point, we do not expect
Okay,
any new
that was the only thing in the
expenditures.
back of my
So
head
we're waiting
that-
till 14, it's appropriated. As long as that doesn't happen, that 37,000 can be transferred wherever you want. Capital asset replacement right now shows revenue, which is all transfers from other funds in fiscal 14 of 1,134,682, and expenditure of 1,169. So it's close to balanced.
And to refresh the board's memory, that essentially is renewal of long-term capital assets, major equipment and such. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of transferring the $37,000 from the 202 Art Bartel Fund to the General Corporate Fund in lieu of the Capital Asset Replacement Fund, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that was an easy one. Mr. Quisenberry, I think I saw your hand first.
Yeah, I'd like to make another amendment that we adjust item 3, which currently specifies a 6-month transition for replacing the retiring zoning administrator. I'd like to amend that to 3 months with a corresponding reduction of allocation.
Is there a second? I heard a second. Was it Mr. Hartke? Thank you. Are there any discussions on this item? Seriously? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. I think Mr. Maxwell's hand was up next.
We're getting fairly close, aren't we?
Yeah.
Deficit 68,000.
How much?
68,000.
68. Help me with this, Deb. Property tax update, it says it's not been put in the new budget yet. Could we take the 61,000 out of the corporate that's proposed from this new money?
It's already in.
You've already done
I
that?
think
right
that's
up
already
here.
in there, yeah.
That
Okay.
was, right.
Thank you.
Mr. Quisenberry or Mr. Kibler, who was first? No, I mean, it's motion time.
I'd like to
Okay, Mr. Quisenberry, go ahead and make your motion.
move
I'm
it-
sorry, I couldn't tell who.
I had my
their
hand up
first.
while Mr. Maxwell had his hand up.
Okay,
too.
I'll take
So,
your word for it.
I'd like to make an amendment that we reduce the proposed allocation for facilities repair by the amount that we are currently out of balance with, which is 68,000. I can't read the number anymore because it was way down below. Is that it? Is that the number? Okay, 68,437.
I'm sorry, who seconded? Mr. Hartke. I assume there'll be discussion on this one. Mr. Quisenberry, you want to speak to your
Yeah, I'd like to
amendment?
speak to this amendment. I believe we have found some things that we could take down a little bit here, and now I am comfortable with several things in mind. I have several things in mind here. First of all, I think we will be able to do a better job of getting state money to do some of the facility things that we have on the list, particularly around the air conditioning equipment. And so I am comfortable knocking that recommended number down by this remaining amount because I believe we'll still be able to do both things. I also believe that even the $20,000 amount or $200,000 amount that we're putting for justice items, that we will do better than that based on work by the Deputy County Administrator for Finance, finding state and federal money to support the things we want to do. So that's why I'm comfortable taking that out of the facilities line item at this point so that we can say that we have a balanced budget and move on.
Thank you. I had Mr. McGuire next.
Well, there we go. That's where it's going to cost us money, I guess, is in facilities. You know, the $600,000 number, we could probably triple the $600,000 and not spend what it costs to fix these buildings. But yet, we started with a number, $155,000 in the budget for the reentry program, but yet we've got to make that number $200,000, and we don't know where we're actually going to spend the money on. But we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of things and priorities that we had for facilities, that we're not even going to fund those, and we're going to kick $68,000 out of there to fund a program we don't know what we're going to spend on. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Harper.
Along with Mr. McGuire, I would have to say Mr. Quisenberry and Ms. Petrie have a hell of a lot more faith in the state of Illinois than I do. And also, I would ask Ms. Busey, if we're going to keep taking money away from facilities, do we have a miscellaneous fund so we can buy a hell of a lot of 5-gallon buckets to catch the rainy water?
Busey, would that be the contingency line?
Part of the stormwater management plan, too.
Part of the stormwater management plan. Mr. James.
Well, and I'm going to have to concur. We've looked at these budgets many times, and I will never, ever support a budget when we're taking away money on needs that are definitely there, that have been put off for years. And I go back to the sheriff's squad cars and other things that we held back while we did other items, and we were putting people at risk. We negotiate with our employees to cut our costs, but yet then we take money that we've saved in some form and start new programs all the time. And I remember not too long ago, Ralph and I served on a committee that we negotiated with the veterans, and it was a state mandated program, but we were able to sit down, formulate a program, hammer it all out, and come up with a program that's working well. They had a plan of action. They had people that were willing to sit at the table and talk with us. And those are our veterans. Those are folks that were willing to work with us for the needs that they saw. But yet this group, because we're hearing we need a reentry, we're hearing that there's something out there, we're ready to jump on it. And I haven't heard that much about it. I've been around 60-some years, and I've seen a lot of programs. I've heard a lot about drugs. I've heard a lot about this. And it seems like to me, we tend to want to throw money at issues instead of doing what is truly our charter, and that is to maintain the money we have coming in the fashion that is the will of the majority of the people out there, and that is to keep things in the order we need to.
Thank you, Mr. James. Mr. Kibler is next, I believe. Then Ms. Schwartz, then Ms. Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would encourage everyone on the board to vote no on this particular item for two key reasons. First of all, everything within the facilities project has been well accounted for. These are things that the committee has gone through and decided these are things we have to do. Whereas the 200,000 is really a number we've brought forward as a good start. I would equally argue that $135,000 is equally a good start, a good seeding for any sort of investment or venture. You know, I have been working with startups for a long time, and $100,000 is a lot of money that can go a long way. And $135,000 to seed a program is a great deal of money that I think would be well received and well liked by the community, while equally maintaining our current assets. So I'd encourage that we vote no on this particular amendment and instead decrement the $200,000 we just allotted and reduce that to $135,000.
I think that 80,000 of the 200 would actually have to go to drug court, which everybody does know a lot about. It's a well-known program and with very good track record. So in fact, we're actually allocating 120 to the unknown, vague reentry to be defined.
Thank you. Ms. Petrie.
Thank you. I just want to assure Mr. Harper that my faith in the state for this money from DCEO has reasonableness, because you and I and all the rest of us are funding the catch of money for sustainability and green building through our utility bills. So it has nothing to do with the state budget. It's a dedicated fund.
Thank you, Ms. Petrie. Mr. Hartke.
I would like to know, what are the 5 projects that this $600,000 has been in facilities has been committed for? Because I keep hearing that we have decided what this money's been spent on, but you know, there are projects listed here, but where are the RFPs? You know, where is the vote to actually put this stuff out? We haven't done it, folks. This money is no more committed spent than this reentry stuff. Yes, there's a list of priorities coming down the pipe. but we haven't spent it, we haven't committed to it. It's an open fund line, just like this 200,000. And I think we've made a heck of a compromise finding money in other places and only knocking this down 68 grand. You know, I don't know what else we're going to get in there, so I'm certainly encouraging members to vote yes on this.
Thank you, Mr. Harkey. I got Mr. McGuire and then Mr. Richards by like a millisecond later.
Well, when I look at the list, it actually has the names of the projects that would possibly be funded rather than just the words reentry or more nebulous terms that are being used for the $200,000. Everything just being bannered around. And I'm someone who supports a reentry program, but nothing's been defined. There's no cost associated with this program, or what costs, or who's going to be hired, or what's going to happen with the $200,000. I think the public would be pretty upset that we're just going to just shove money out there in the budget, especially when we're cutting facilities and putting the buildings of the county in jeopardy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Richards is next. I've got you, Mr. Harkey.
I think taking the $68,000 is a pretty good compromise when we should be able to get $200,000-$400,000 worth of state grant money on these projects. And further than that, I will say that I'm committed to getting these projects done. I'm confident that if for some reason we can't get this funded, even though we keep getting bugged by DCEO, please ask for our money, apply for the money. If in 6 months, for some reason, the money's already been spent by DCEO, I'm confident that we have the votes on this board to pay for these projects. And I will guarantee the Republican caucus that as Democratic caucus chair, I will make sure that you have the votes to hit that supermajority requirement.
Mr. Kibler.
There are a lot of things to speak to with the past few speakers on this one. If there's anything specific you want to see, Mr. Hartke, beyond juvenile detention center water heater number 1, as opposed to just water heaters in general, or as opposed to just water systems in general.
Again, I ask, where's the RFP?
Hold on, order.
As specific as you're ever going to see, not even in a budget. So this is what we'd like to see happen, and even then, the $750,000 has been decremented to $600,000. Now we're decrementing an additional 10%. So instead of investing in addition to investing a considerable amount of money to what we don't know is actually there yet, we've heard from let's reinstate the drug court to let's do other sorts of programs that we wanted. Instead of saying, this is what we want to do with the 200 grand, we're just making it open-ended. That's issue number 1. But 2, bringing it down to $135,000 from 200 should theoretically not impact you a whole heck of a lot. Whereas if we do get DCEO money, we do get it. That's even more money that we can put towards our capital improvements that have to be done anyways because we're already decremented from $750,000. So there are so many things that we can do to improve our facilities, including going after DCEO money. You're absolutely spot on about that. However, that doesn't mean you take it out to fund something that you don't even have a definition for. You don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kibler. Mr. Hartke, and then Ms. Bergson.
With the director address. Look, I think we made it quite clear. We've talked about the drug court, and we've talked about reentry. Everybody's like, all these nebulous programs we're talking about. Reentry has been very specific. We have several specific plans that Mr. Kurtz has already begun looking at, and if we don't commit the money now, within the time of the next month or two when we start looking at seriously which plan we want to go forward with, this money will not be there. And if we talk about 80 grand for drug court, 50 to 100 grand for reentry, that's going to leave maybe 30 to 40 grand that we can put towards mental health in some way if that's really what you're interested in. But the point being that again, yes, we have a list of potential projects, but we have not committed any specific money to these projects. And again, saying chiller is, which chiller, which one's going to blow first, how are we going to replace it, is just as specific as saying which reentry program are we going to use. We are going to do one. Are we going to contract it out? Are we going to hire somebody? What program are we going to do? I don't see that there's that much difference. Plus, let me add, we're talking about facilities as if they are the only priority this county has to worry about. $750,000 worth of priority. To me, reentry is priority. To me, justice is a priority. To my constituents and to my caucus. So that's why I would like to maybe call the question.
Was that a maybe call the question, or was that a call the question? Ms. Schwartz has seconded that. I would certainly encourage people to vote no, because I've still got things I'd like to say. But all in favor of ending debate on this topic, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Aye. I will declare that motion failed, and we will continue debate with Ms. Bergson.
We've all been young and had houses and cars and kids. When you put aside money, and the house needed painting, and your kid needed a French tutor, you left the house and you got the French tutor. You put aside money for the kid just as seriously. You value that person almost as much, I think, as the house and the car. But here, what we're saying is, this program, which is a people program that we have no idea how it's going to turn out, just like a kid. We don't know where the money is going to get spent, where it's going to get saved. So we have to be indefinite about it. But the money's got to be there because something is likely to fall through.
Ms. Bergson, I understand your metaphor, but if I do have any kids, I don't know about them. We're going to go to Mr. Kurtz.
Watch out, you will.
Well, I do know about kids. I have 2 plus 3 grandkids, so I know where my money's going. It's not going into my house, it's going into funds for them, for college. But speaking to this issue, Jeff, you want a specific, okay? I'm going to give you a specific. I will forward out to the entire board, okay, the reentry program that we're looking at from Pittsburgh. This is a 10-year program that has had extremely great data on recidivism and lowering incarceration. And I want everyone to see a model that I talked over very extensively with Dr. Cal on how this program has worked. He's been in Pittsburgh, God knows how many years, to work this program out, and 10 years. And I will specifically send out the specifics so that you can take a look at it, and so I will also send it to James, because I've been working with Mr. Kilgore for a couple of months now on working a reentry program, and I've just received this other new one, which is very, very specific. I'll let you take a look at it.
Send it to everyone.
I'm going to send it to the entire full board tonight, before tomorrow, depending upon what time we get out of here.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Okay. I hear the comments about this not being very specific, and I understand that. What I would like to suggest is that with this Pittsburgh program and with the other things like drug court and other things that people have in their mind, maybe mental health programs, I would be totally comfortable if in the next several weeks we can nail this number down to a smaller number than $200,000, voting to restore whatever is taken off that to the facilities thing that we want to do. But at this point, I think I agree with Mr. Alex, when people have talked about the good programs and the good ideas that are possibly there, I've heard people talking about things that probably are going to add up to $200,000. So I'm not ready to do that yet. But if we can refine this to a more detailed number in the coming weeks, I'd be totally comfortable with revisiting, because we have until we vote on the final budget to make adjustments, correct, Ms. Busey? So, if it looks like it's $180,000, I'd vote to move the $20,000 back to facilities. I would do that. But this is where I want to be at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry. Mr. Langenheim?
I've lost interest.
Thank you, sir. Mr. James, I assume you have not lost interest.
I just want to say that when I hear all this about caring for people and everything else, there's a lot of programs. And we funded a lot of things here with the self-help desk. Mental health has a budget of its own. Public health has a budget. Board of Health has a budget. There are so many programs out there. Maybe we need to somehow consolidate that. We got too many programs with too many buildings and too many upper chiefs making the big bucks. But every time we start this and we keep saying the need, we got to pull money here, we're neglecting what is here now. And, all the things about there's not specific numbers, not this. A budget is a budget. And I'm just so I'm so sad that with everything that goes on in our country, and we all hear the same thing, everybody's broke, everybody's fighting for money. The state's going to apparently cut off their funding to drug court, so guess who it falls on? Us. And we want to do it because it's right, and that's fair. But then we have all these other issues, and we just got to stop and think that we're here to budget this money wisely, to keep up what we have in the infrastructure and our roads, and they're falling apart across us. I don't know how else to say it simply, but to say, where does all this come from? I make a certain salary a year. I have to budget through the year. There's times I'd like a haircut. I can't afford a haircut. Or I'd like to buy some new clothes, but I can't buy new clothes. And that's just life. We have to say no. We can't please everybody in the room all the time. And folks, we got to learn that, and it's mainly down party lines, and it's sad. And I don't know why, because I woke up the same way everyone in this room did, and I respect people, and I respect their needs. But you can't expect everybody to always be paying the bill. You can't always expect all these programs, and I know they're needed, but there has to be better ways, whether the community steps up to the plate, other organizations step up to the plate. But this is taxpayers' money. This is, we're all tired of being beaten over the head with property tax, sales tax. Every time I go to the restaurant now, 10%? Are you kidding me? You know, where's it going to stop? And when we talk about outcomes, I keep going back. I'm 61 years old. A lot of these programs have been here since I was a young man, and they're still ongoing. Now I hear how bad this drug thing is, and they want to do something different with it. Well, there's always a better course or a better set of action, but always coming to the pot isn't going to cut it. So I will never, ever, as long as I'm on a committee or board, always support increasing funds on the taxpayers' backs to support programs to me that have not worked to this date.
Thank you, Mr. James. If there are no, Mr. Harper.
Kudos to Mr. James there. And most of you probably figured I am a pain. Somebody brought up earlier that, you know, we're concerned more about the buildings than the people. Well, this county is what, 210,000 people in the county. Over half of those, or right at half of them, live outside of the city limits of Champaign-Urbana. So I would like the sheriff to have a deputy's car unless he can afford a horse to ride out to the rural areas to patrol things. But all this money, you're up to $500,000 already, and you have down here $1.37 million for this Justice Task Force. The average daily occupancy of the jail is 0.1% of this county population. Yes, these programs could help anybody, but who are we supposed to take care of? There's more than 0.1% of 1% of the people in this county use every building in this county. I'm not against helping anybody, but the pot's only so big.
Thank you. If no one else wishes to speak, I've got a couple of comments. I made the recommendations that I made for a reason. I mean, we do have serious facilities issues. We've been deferring maintenance for a long time. That being said, I will support this for the following reasons. First of all, this is not money that we are spending. This is money that we are budgeting. And the idea behind budgeting is to lay out the roadmap for what we're probably going to do, but it may not be exactly what we're going to do. Mr. Quisenberry made a good point. We may spend less than this. If so, I'm sure we'll find something else to spend it on, like facilities. Two, realistically, when I made these recommendations, and I mentioned this in my email, I was assuming that some portion of that facilities money was going to have to go to the modifications that the sheriff's probably going to request for the jail in accordance with the Kalamanoff report to be able to accomplish a short-term goal of getting people out of downtown. What I heard earlier was if we need to do that, that money can come out of this justice budget as it is, rather than coming out of the facilities budget. So I think we've relieved the facilities line of that obligation, which wasn't among their requests, but I think was going to be among their problems. Third, I mean, I think this is, we can talk about, you know, this is people versus facilities, or this is facilities versus you know, social programs. To me, I look at the Kalamanoff report, and a significant number of the recommendations from the CJTF, and I see ways of saving money. And I think the points have been well made tonight that we probably need to explore as many of these as we have the money to do in order to try to actually get a payback, because the idea here is we're trying to save the taxpayers money in the long run, because we know, as Mr. James said, the state's going to keep dumping this stuff on our shoulders. If we have somebody who's running for a state legislature, it'd be a great thing to try to work on for us. And then finally, we're talking about, what's the number, $68,000? Out of a $40 million budget that we know is going to be off by $500,000 one way or the other by the time we get to the end of the year. So I think at this point, I'm happy to have that money sitting unspent in this line just as well as I am having it sitting unspent in the facilities line, because we know that these aren't the actual dollar amounts that we're going to spend anyway. So I will support this. That being said, all those in favor? I was waiting for that. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Bergson. Esri. Harper. Hartke. James. Jay. Kibler.
No.
Kurtz. Langenheim. Maxwell. McGuire. Petrie. Quisenberry.
Yes.
Richards.
Yes.
Rosales.
Yes.
Schwartz. Alex.
Yes. The motion carries. Are we theoretically imbalanced? Are we theoretically balanced? Okay, would anybody like to make motion to introduce further amendments? Mr. Kibler?
I'm more looking to talk to the main motion, which is on number 9, you mentioned 79,200 to the highway federal aid match. But when looking through the slide deck prepared, and I lost my place now, you have some going to the nursing home, some going to random places that equals the amount of 79,200. Just curious if you could count for that, which is page 13. Your microphone.
Sorry, I turned it off when I thought it was turning on. The amount that's going to, those are essentially the amount that if we apportioned it equally to all the levies would go. We're proposing to apportion the full amount to general corp, the full amount to public health. I believe the nursing home's already at the 3-cent limit, so I don't think that could go to the nursing home anyway. And then, so we're basically taking all those items except the first and the last and adding them up and applying them to the federal aid highway match, which otherwise would be $52 or $54 or something like that.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it.
You're welcome. Additional motions, comments to the main motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the main motion, which is to adopt these recommendations as amended, I don't think I need to read them again. Mr. Kurtz says, please don't, so I won't. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I will declare that passed. That concludes finance.
Oh, that's fine. And the next chair, you don't have any report, do you? I have nothing to report. No report? Is there any other business? We're adjourned.